people, Trish Wood here of the Trish Wood is Critical podcast, and this is your midweek meltdown. There is a hospital in downtown Toronto where the main interface at the front door between patient and their caregiver or family member is a security guard, which made me think about what our new normal is like, right? I mean, there are security guards everywhere now. Even though the acute phase of COVID has passed, we see them everywhere still. It's now become, to use their phrase, normalized, hasn't it? The idea that a major downtown hospital would post a security guard at the front door was pretty, it's a pretty shocking idea for me. Now, what I understand about it is that this hospital is under a massive renovation. It's been going on for years. A lot of very clever, wealthy donors who will get their name on a building gave money for certain things to be done, including 5 football fields worth of new renovation. They crow in their media releases about it. Only into COVID did they actually increase their ICU beds. The rest of it is going for other things. I'm sure it's all important, but some of it's like brand new shiny equipment and better windows for the maternity, stuff like that. But this is the big renovation that is causing as I understand it, the emergency department to be smaller. I don't know why they couldn't have said, gee, we're going to need to have a normal sized emergency department during the renovations, but they didn't, or I don't know what happened, but they didn't. And so they feel they need to have a security guard who keeps out loved ones under some circumstances and friends or people who are going to advocate under other circumstances. Those decisions are being made, I think that's a huge ethical violation. We've been moving toward this. We saw it during COVID. We saw people dying alone, which I kind of rant about. But once it's okay to let your loved one die and the only contact with you is over an iPad, it kind of feels like all bets are off, right? We've crossed a line there. And so now the idea that a uniformed person is saying who can go in and out of an emergency department and who can stay or not stay in an emergency department is very, very scary. It's not good for people. We told the story on this podcast some time ago of Kai Matthews, a lovely young man, 18 years old, who died because, in my view, because his parents were not allowed into the emergency room to advocate for him while he was dying of meningitis. Imagine that. It's awful story, and you can catch it on an old episode of the podcast. It's pretty hard to listen to, actually. It was a shameful event by the health system in Nova Scotia, Canada. There's cruelty. It's cruel to not let parents in. He was calling out to the parking lot on his cell phone, begging his father to come in and help him. He was in so much pain and they wouldn't let him in. Imagine that. So security guards at the door of an emergency room are not needed and they're not wanted. And I hope that this hospital really rethinks that policy. This comes after years, almost 2 years of fear pushed by politicians and public health to get compliance, pushed by Tony Fauci, pushed by Boris Johnson, pushed by Justin Trudeau, pushed by Joe Biden. We are all full of anxiety right now. They are destroying our mental health. And now, because of the mistakes they have made, and yes, they have made many, many mistakes, instead of asking why people are struggling mentally, why people are upset with them, why people might be upset that they can't go into the emergency room with a loved one, instead of asking those questions, instead of caring for us in a humane way, right? They're just hiring muscle. That's what they're doing, right? And that makes the problem worse. So they create one problem they don't resolve it, then they do something else to resolve it, and it creates, so now they've got two problems, right? They're not sitting around trying to figure out why people are so upset and maybe change the policy. They're hiring security guards instead as the representation. In my view, those security guards represent their failure. They're changing how we relate to each other. They're changing what we are allowed to expect from places like hospitals and doctors and medicine. They're practicing telemedicine. That's a huge, and in my opinion, very, very dangerous downgrade. We're already seeing stories of people losing their lives because the doctor missed something by not seeing them. But we're being primed to accept all of these things. And I think those of us who have been awake to it the longest, since kind of March of 2020 or April 2020, maybe we're suffering the most because we've been aware of it the most, or the longest. But I think that's what's happening here. I'm seeing things, I say this on the show all the time. Every day I find myself thinking or saying, how did that happen? Or well, how is that okay? Or how did they get away with making that law? I do. And even though COVID is abating in many, many places, virtually over in many places, we're still feeling like we're living in this new, unkind, authoritarian world. And, I fear that the people running the show are making the dividing line between themselves and their people even more entrenched. I feel that happening. I see it happening. And I think people are traumatized. I do. I feel people are traumatized. I've said it before. And so if one of the reasons the security guards are being posted in various places is because they're dealing with traumatized people who are misbehaving, my prescription for that is don't hire more security guards. Stop traumatizing people. Let people have their lives back. Stop the propaganda and the nonsense, and let doctors go back to practicing compassionate medicine. I know there are many who still do. I'm not saying they're all. But I will tell you that watching what is happening in medicine right now and the way it's happening has really shifted something in me. And knowing about this security guard and how they're being used in hospitals just solidified that for me. So pay attention.